This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
We're nearly, so very nearly, in March. The weather's warming up, and so are we. We're getting the hang of this now. It's episode 5 of Partners in Crime. Well, here we are again. Episode 5, Bob.
Yes, who'd have thought it?
Who'd have thought? Certainly not us. I've got to admit, I've hardly watched or read anything this week. It was my son's birthday, which was very inconsiderate of him. Plus, the weather's been a lot better, so I've been pottering around in the garden a lot this week. So I've had something of a week off, which feels quite naughty to say, actually.
Well, it's a good thing to have happy distractions, certainly.
Yeah.
Your son's first birthday and a lovely garden to tend.
Well,
it's nice. It's good. You need
I
to
so
rest
rarely get the
cells
time
every now and
off.
again.
That's the thing. I so rarely get any time off.
Well, you have a very, very strong work ethic, Adam.
Well,
and, from my point, it's good to see you relaxing.
Good. I do feel naughty. I do feel like the boy who skived off school for a week. But there we go. Let's get back to some more unpaid work with the podcast, shall we? All I have done this week is I've knocked a few chapters off of the second MJ Arledge book, which I'm in the middle of reading at the moment, the Helen Grace thrillers, which are very good. And I bought, where is it here, the Blu-ray box set of Spiral, which I have in my hand, which you recommended to me.
This is our theme throughout our episodes so far.
Spiral.
The continuation of Spiral. And I know I feed this obsession.
Bob's love affair.
Can I? Let me just touch the box. Yes, that's marvellous. I feel a lot better. That's, well, good. I envy you.
I do have a bit of a bone to pick with you over it, actually, because I bought the box set.
It's in French. That's not the bone, is it?
No, that's fine. That's fine. But you
don't speak French, do you?
Well, I realised that I had to buy a new Blu-ray player. The one that I had wasn't up to it. So I bought a new Blu-ray player, which again is fine. It's something I probably should have done a while back. And then I unpacked this Blu-ray player, having waited for it to arrive, and got very, very excited. I went to slide it into my TV cabinet, and it's 1 centimetre too wide. It won't fit in the TV cabinet. So I bought a new TV cabinet.
Sorry. That's one of the most absurd stories I've heard in a long time. That is marvellous.
All I'll say is Spiral had better be good, because it's cost me about 200 quid so far.
Well, exactly, but I'm sure your cabinet is a great improvement on the one that was there before.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, the cat had chewed the other one. It was a wooden one. He's got this habit of chewing on one of the corners, so I've got a nice new sleek one, which hopefully will be cat-proof.
Well, as long as you don't start chewing on the corners out of frustration at the extreme cost of watching a wonderful French subtitled crime thriller, I don't mind. But good.
If it's good, I don't mind.
Have you started it yet?
I haven't yet. No,
right.
no.
Well, you've been gardening and having birthday parties, so
yes, and buying furniture.
Okay, well, that's waiting for you. I envy you.
I can't wait. I'll try and get onto it this week, so I've got something to talk about at least in the next episode, because that's me done. That was my week.
Well, my week has been quite busy too. I did a voiceover for the Guide Dogs for the Blind, which was quite jolly. Nothing to do with crime. I hope.
That would be a good idea for a book, wouldn't it?
Well, yes.
As somebody commits a crime, but they didn't actually do it. Their highly trained guide dog had been committing the burglaries for them.
Right. Well, I'll let you write that one. No, I've been watching. I watched the first episode of Collateral, which is David Hare's new television piece. Very, very good. I have to say.
Sell it to me.
Well, it's a crime political thriller, being David Hare, of course, it's going to be have lots of state of the nation things to say. I guess dare say as the series goes on. Great, strong performances from Kerry Mulligan as the leading DI. It's a murder investigation. It starts with the killing of a pizza delivery man who's just delivered a single pizza to the ex-wife of a Labour MP. And it goes on from there. It certainly has a great opening. And a great pace, and with Kerry Mulligan playing the leading role, Billy Piper and the always marvellous Nicola Walker, and a great supporting cast as well. It's really very good. A few people have said that it's a little bit clunky at times, sort of trying to get in little political statements here and whatever. But that's David. That's David Hare.
Yeah.
It is. So I'll be fascinated to see where it goes. I'm hooked. That's for sure. So that's on Tuesdays on BBC One. If you're worldwide and you can download the BBC iPlayer, it's on that. It's called Collateral by David Hare, Kerry Mulligan, and it's my recommendation of the week.
Excellent. So you spent the whole week watching that, have you?
No, well, it's only one episode so far. I have been watching another one. I've started watching another one, which I'll probably talk about next time. A new series starring Sharon Stone, but I'll mention that last time. So,
Excellent.
and I've been actually reading the new Mark Billingham, which is absolutely marvellous. But I'll talk about that to Mark in a minute.
Have you read my one now? Because I know in a previous episode we were talking about my new book being out and doing very well, and you said yes, that's my read of the week, and then off air afterwards, once the mics were closed, you said, I'm looking forward to reading your book.
Yes, I did say that, and I haven't. You see, this is the sad contempt that friends can actually show each other. I mean, don't take it personally, and let's please carry on talking. No, I haven't, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm saving it. Is my weak excuse, but it is nonetheless
save the best till last.
I'm having a couple of days off, and I'm going to take that book with me. And so yes, but I know lots of people who have been reading it and think it's fantastic. So
good.
They've got me off the hook on that one, I hope.
Well, you mentioned Mark Billingham, and he is this week's guest. We'll be talking to him in a little while about his best-selling Tom Thorne series of crime novels, which have been turned into a TV series starring David Morrissey. And he'll be answering your questions as well, which you've sent to us on Facebook and Twitter over the past few days. And we do read everything that you send, and we quite often will read them out on the show as well if they're any good. So please do feel free to get in touch. You can tweet us at Crime Fic Podcast. We're on Facebook, Partners in Crime Podcast. Our website is partnersincrime.online, or you can email hello@partnersincrime.online. This week's guest is Mark Billingham, a man who's seen all corners of the entertainment industry as an actor, TV writer, stand-up comedian, and since 2001 as a best-selling crime writer. His Tom Thorne novels have topped the charts all around the world, and in 2010 were adapted for television by Sky, starring David Morrissey as Tom Thorne. His non-Thorne novels have also been adapted for TV, and Mark regularly appears on radio and television as an industry commentator. We spoke to him a little earlier this week. Now, Mark, writers quite often get asked what their inspiration is for books, and quite often we don't have an interesting story to tell, but with your second Tom Thorne book, Scaredy Cat, you had quite an interesting inspiration for that book, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Well, I suppose so. I mean, the incident I think you're talking about was that book was the first time I kind of wrote about it, or wrote about something similar. Before I even wrote the first book, I was the victim of a very strange crime in a Manchester hotel room where 3 guys in balaclavas burst into my room and tied me up and put a bag over my head and kicked the whatever out of me and told me they were going to kill me and kept me there for a few hours while they ran around Manchester with my ATM card. And it was all very scary. I mean, as brushes with violent crime go, it was all right. I mean, at the end of it, I was still knocking around, no bones broken. I got everything back that I'd lost. You know what I mean? It's not nothing too traumatic, but I came away from it feeling that when I was going to write that first book, because I was toying with writing that first book, I very much wanted to make the victim front and center, because I got tired of reading crime novels where you had a cop and a killer and they're both on this sort of collision course, and the victim, or often victims, are just plot points. They're just catalysts for a story and you don't get to know them or engage with them. So I was determined to do that, and I think it made me pretty good at writing about fear, writing about being scared, because that was the worst thing, was just lying on that floor not knowing what they were going to do, being scared, like, not scared like you're on a roller coaster, not scared like you're watching a horror movie, but scared like, am I going to see my wife and kids again? Scared. So, I was able to key into that, I think, and to a degree still am. I mean, I still jump at loud noises. That's the only,
so there's still post-traumatic stress attached to it, understandably, because it's such a shocking thing to happen.
Yeah, and there were at the time. I mean, at the time I was still working as a stand-up, so I was spending an awful lot of time in hotels. up and down the country. And I mean, you feel safe in a hotel. It would never occur to me that you could answer a knock on the hotel room door and that there'd be 3 guys in balaclavas. It just never occurred to me. So anyway, I used a similar kind of, incident as part of the second book, and it's something I think has probably informed most of the books on one level or another.
Well, it must be because most crime writers won't have experienced, thankfully, something as traumatic as that. So I guess they have to, second guess it. Most writers do.
Well, you say that. I don't know whether you've ever interviewed Simon Koenig, but if you interview Simon Koenig, ask him about his traumatic incident. It's actually way worse than mine.
My God.
So one or two of us have had some experience.
Wow.
Does it give you a new perception of fear then? That kind of it must inform everything. You're right, as you say.
It absolutely does, because I can remember I was lying on that floor and my heart was thumping so much I was bouncing off the carpet. I could actually sort of feel my chest leaving the carpet, and it was, and it just went very quiet. When 2 of them were running around Manchester, they left 1 guy in the room. And I was, hog-tied with a bag over my head by this point. And if I made a noise, because it starts to really hurt after about half an hour when you got your arms tied behind your back, and I'd sort of groan and come over and give me a kick, and I'd shut up again. And I was just lying there not knowing what was going to happen. In the end, they just left. They got what they wanted and just left. And it was over. And they never got caught. The police didn't make the best job of the investigation, shall we say, which was something else that kind of informed some of the writing as well.
That doesn't always end as happily as it does in the novels, does it?
No, absolutely it does. And again, that was something I wanted to reflect, I'm sure these 3 lads, and they were just lads, were every bit as scared as I was. In fact, I know they were. Because they were risking a pretty hefty prison sentence for what? A couple of £100 cash and a watch and a phone? I mean, really? But it was.
But that's area of fear that you worry, because you think, my goodness me, they're very scared about this, and that fear that they have can lead them to take drastic action.
Absolutely, it's how things can really escalate, isn't it?
Oh goodness me! Well, I'm slightly sweating just listening to you talk about that, Mark.
Well, I mean, obviously, I still spend a lot of time in hotels when I'm on book tours and stuff, and to this day, even if there's a spy hole, even if I can see somebody in dressed like a cleaner, I'm still going ID under the door. I'm not opening this door for anybody.
Not taking any chances, no.
Well, not to make light of it, but I'm in a Manchester hotel room on Wednesday night, so I'll be locking the doors.
Well, this kind of the thing that you're talking about there, with real life informing the books and you kind of discovering things at the same time as readers. Something else I've read is that when you were writing Tom Thorne, you, especially from the start, you didn't really have any kind of plans necessarily for where things were going and who he was, and you're kind of discovering him at the same time as us readers do. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's still the case, to be honest. I sort of took the decision early on. I mean, the interesting thing was he wasn't actually the main character even in the first book. I mean, he had the most screen time, I suppose. There needed to be a detective, so I created him. So he was around a lot, but the character I really poured everything into in that first book was the victim, who spent the whole book in a coma and you're inside her head and stuff. Then it became clear that Thorne was going to go on and there were going to be more books. But I'm still sort of grateful in retrospect that I didn't write this dossier on him. I didn't say this is where he went to school and this is what he has for breakfast. This is his family tree. So I really don't know any more about him book on book than the reader does, which gets you into trouble, because sometimes I'll get an email from a reader going, oh, you've changed the colour of his eyes or whatever it might be. So you can make little mistakes, but the plus side is that hopefully he's still unpredictable. That I want him to be unpredictable, to be surprising, to often do things the readers are not very happy about, to go into areas that they don't approve of necessarily. But that way I'm not bored with him,
Do you find that with Tom that he's influenced you? Obviously, as a writer, you influence absolutely your characters. But has anything that you discovered on your journey over the novels with Tom influenced you at all in taste?
Well, I think he's changed as I've changed. And I think we kind of influence, we rub off on one another. I mean, he's definitely not the same character he was nearly 20 years ago. I'm certainly not the same writer or indeed the same person I was 20 years ago. I mean, which of us is? That change is important. We put these characters, crime writers, we put these characters through this horrendous amount of grief and pain and death and loss and violence. How can they not change? How can they not change just from one book to the next, from one case to the next? If they don't, then they're just cartoons. So yeah, he's like me in a lot of ways. I'm like him in some ways. But then again, writers are always asked that, how much of yourself is in that central character? Yes, there's a fair bit of me, but there's a fair bit of me in all the characters. The villains as well as the heroes. So you put anything of yourself that you think will be useful.
You talked about your changing over time there, Mark. You've written, you've been an actor, and you're also a musician as well. And something I wanted to something I wanted to talk to you about was how on earth you can end up getting into a band with Val McDermid. We did put some questions out actually to our listeners on Facebook and Twitter. We asked for some input, and Alison Waterfield on Twitter wanted to know specifically how the fun-loving crime writers came about, and that's something that I'm very interested in too.
Well, in terms of Val, I mean, I'll come back to Val in a minute, but Val and I had sung together before at the World Mystery Convention. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We got up with a band and we sang "Crying" by Roy Orbison and a couple of other things.
Did you do it Only Fools and Horses style though?
No, I mean, I knew Val could sing. I mean, Val's a great singer and a guitar player, and had a history playing in folk clubs and stuff way back. So I knew she could sing. The Fun-Loving Crime Writers came about quite simply, again, at another World Mystery Convention, the one in New Orleans, the year before last. And on the last night, there was a show at the House of Blues in New Orleans, incredibly famous club. And the idea was that there was going to be a band and people could get up, rather like it happened at the one I described before with Val. It didn't quite go very smoothly in terms of the sort of transition of people getting up. But as the band left, they shouted, "Where are the Brits? There are some Brits." And Brits in question were myself, Stuart Neville, and Doug Johnston. And we just sort of shambled up on stage with a New Orleans crime writer called Bill LaFelme, who was with us, who could drum. So he started drumming, and we just absolutely busked our way through Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash and Werewolves of London by Warren Zevon and 500 Miles by the Proclaimers, right? It went very well, and somebody put it on YouTube, and then we just got contacted by the programmer for the Edinburgh Book Festival, who said, "Right, I'm programming you to do an hour and a half at the Edinburgh Book Festival in August." And we went, "Eh?" And so we had a few months to just basically put the rest of the band together, which turned out to be Val and Chris Brookmeyer and the brilliant Luca Veste, who's an amazing bass player. I mean, I should say that there are 3 incredible musicians in this band, who are Stuart, Doug, and Luca. And the rest of us, I mean, I sing and play guitar. Chris sings and plays guitar. Val sings. She's up front. She's our Debbie Harry. And, we're sort of riding on the coattails of 3 really good musicians. But we rehearse when we can, which tends to be once every 6 months, because we're all in different parts of the world. And we put together a 14 or 15 song set, and we're loving it. I mean, we were at the Winter Woods Festival in Pitlochry on Saturday night and had a great show. And it's just, it's something a bit different. People see all our names on a bill, and they might have read our books, or they might have read some people's books, but they don't know what they're in for, and they come along and we rock and roll for an hour and a half. All the songs are about murder. So they're all cover versions of songs about murder. Watching the Detectives by Elvis Costello, I Fought the Law by The Clash. There's Johnny Cash, there's Hank Williams, there's the Rolling Stones, there's all sorts of stuff in there,
Well, I had a friend who was there on Saturday night and said you all knocked it out of the park.
It was great. You won't believe how much fun we have doing it. It's, a lot of middle-aged crime writers indulging rock star fantasies, but it's terrific fun.
I love the way you describe yourself as a twisted collective of musically inclined crime writers who enjoy murdering songs for fun.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. We just take and we all have very different musical influences. That's the thing. Stuart is kind of rock. I'm country, Val is folk, Chris is a bit more indie. So when we talk about what new songs we're going to do, there's all sorts of things get thrown into the mix, and it just makes for a very interesting set. But every time we've got a gig on the horizon, next one is Glasgow in a couple of weeks at the I-Write Festival, we just get so hyped up. The only downside is it makes writing seem terribly dull.
Well, I mean, that's it. See, Mark, you're an international best-selling author, broadcaster, a wonderful podcaster, I have to say. I love your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
It's great. And also, comedian, raconteur. I mean, where do you squeeze the time out to do absolutely everything? Do you have a really disciplined work ethic, or how would you describe yourself as?
I'd love to say I had a terribly disciplined work ethic. I mean, but it's not true. I mean, it's disciplined in one way. The book always gets done. I've written a book a year now for kind of 18 years. It always gets done because I'm fairly good at just time management, I think. I look at the diary and I go, okay, well, that's a week you've got to spend writing because the following week you've got 2 gigs coming up, you've got a lot of traveling. And I can't write when I'm on the road. I'm terrible at doing that. So I have to say that is writing time and that is, pimping time, yes, or whatever. That's showing off time. And I just managed to get it done. I'm quite anal in the way I can organise stuff. The actual writing isn't disciplined at all. Well, as you know, I mean, it's not 9 to 5, is it? No. You can't make yourself do it, but the book is in your head all the time. So actually, even if I'm backstage about to go on stage with the fun-loving crime writers, I'm thinking about the book on one level. It's always in your head, when you're pushing a trolley around a supermarket or walking the dog or whatever it is, you're still working stuff out and ideas will come to you.
You're always working, aren't you?
Well, there's a common perception.
Well, you always think, yeah, absolutely, you're always working.
Unless you're hitting the QWERTY, no one thinks you're working.
No, which is ridiculous because hitting the QWERTY is just when that's typing.
Yes.
It's not, so much of it takes place at other times and in other spaces. As you drift away to sleep at night, you start thinking, that's what I need to do. And because it's crime fiction, you're inevitably trying to, and plotting is very important. You might just hit a brick wall and have to walk away for a while. Because you go, how am I going to sort this out? I've painted myself into a corner. And then 3 days later, in the shower, you suddenly go, right, that's how to solve it. And then you can't wait to get back to the keyboard and get it down.
Well, you've also had a huge success with television transpositions of your work. I mean, a great favourite of mine was Thorn, and David, I thought, was absolutely terrific. And,
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. And, of course, more recently, In the Dark, bringing Alison Weeks to the screen superbly, I thought. And you have another project, Rush of Blood, am I right in saying that's being developed for television?
Yeah, I mean, you say I've had success on television. I mean, I'm very lucky that those shows have been made. But there's also been a fair amount of bad luck. I mean, I shouldn't moan, I suppose, but Thorn should have got on. And we were well into developing the next series of Thorn when the head of drama at the BBC left.
That happens every 3 weeks, it seems to me.
Sorry, This was Sky.
A new brush sweeps clean. It always happens in television.
Absolutely. And it happened again with In the Dark. The way TV works, how slowly those wheels turn. So that by the time In the Dark went out, it hadn't been commissioned by the current head of drama. It hadn't even been commissioned by that person's predecessor, but by that person's predecessor. So when the people in those positions that aren't invested in a show, and as you say, new brooms and all that kind of stuff. And with Rush of Blood, it was even worse. That show was not just commissioned; it was greenlit. It was greenlit, and it was announced, to the press.
Yes.
At a big BBC posh bash. And then the writer quit. The writer, I think he got nominated for an Oscar, so decided he didn't want to quit. That kind of thing. And so that's gone back onto the back burner. We're still developing it. We've got brilliant new scripts written by a wonderful writer called John Donnelly, that are just terrific. So we're very hopeful Rush of Blood will one day hit
well,
the screen.
so am I, because I really look forward to seeing that. I mean, I had a bittersweet moment last night because I went to bed with your new book at 10 o'clock. The sweetness was I absolutely love it, especially after having read Die of Shame recently, and lovely to see Nicola Tanner. And the bitterness was I was still reading it at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob.
If I sound a little tired this morning,
I did wonder why you turned up at my house at 9 o'clock this morning, looking very bleary-eyed.
It's a lovely way to go. And yet again, I mean, I know that you have this theory which you practice perfectly about the big start and the hook. You know, was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I knew part of it, so I felt at home straight away. But there was it just hits straight away. And loving Tom Thorne as I do.
That was something I actually learned from stand-up. I mean, I didn't actually stop doing stand-up probably until about nine years ago. So there was a big overlap when I was writing the books and still gigging. And you know, when you walk on stage at the Comedy Store, you've got to hit quickly. You can't say stick with me, I'll get funny in 10 minutes. You know, they'll start throwing glasses. You know. And there's no question that you know the opening of a book is hugely important. I mean, it's all important, but the opening is massively important. The ending is massively important. It's just that horrible bit in the middle that you've got to get through. But yeah, and I write as a reader. I kind of write. I've always got a reader's hat on when I'm writing, and I know that when I'm reading a book, if that book hasn't engaged me after 20, 30 pages, I'm putting it down. I'm giving up. I'm not one of these people that will plow through a book. And I don't really understand those readers who do, because if you're not enjoying it, you know, reading is supposed to be a pleasurable activity. And if you're struggling with a book, for God's sake, put it down and pick up another one. There's too many good books out there, you know.
Well, you'd turn off a television programme or switch channels, wouldn't you?
Of course you would. Of course you would. You know, you wouldn't carry on listening to an album if the first 3 tracks were terrible. I do think it's a weird thing. You know, readers don't owe writers anything. You know, a book is written and it's read, and it's a 2-part process. It's a deal, and you know, unless it's read, it doesn't kind of really exist. And if a reader doesn't get something out of it or isn't enjoying it, they've got every right to just put it down and go no.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on the subject of you know, when you're writing, you're doing it as a reader, you're sort of looking at it through the reader's eyes. That kind of leads me on to another question we had from Lynn Gator Schofield on Facebook, who wanted to know about your thoughts of David Morrissey playing Tom Thorne, and from that I wanted to kind of try and get whether what you have seen of Thorne influences how you write him, whether that kind of feeds back into your books again.
Well, firstly, David was the actor I always wanted to play Thorne. I got incredibly lucky. You know, from the very first moment your first book is produced, people say, "Oh, who would you like to play your character on TV?" They think we're all obsessed with it, and they ask now. And I'd seen David be brilliant in all sorts of stuff, in State of Play and in Blackpool, and I just hit upon this ruse of saying his name as often as possible in interviews. And I'd say David Morrissey, and I thought one day he's going to find out about it. Anyway, so
I might try that with Brad Pitt.
Well, yeah, do it.
Yeah.
It worked like a charm. One day David was filming somewhere abroad and had a day off, and he wandered into a bookshop and he bought a pile of books, and one of them was mine, and he read it, he liked it, he Googled me, he Googled my name, and up came his name.
Oh, scary.
And he went, blimey, looks like I'm playing this bloke. And he came back to London, he called me, we met up. I mean, it just worked like a dream. And he was brilliant as Thorne because he's such a smart actor, and he did such a lot of work into stuff like Thorne's backstory. I mean, actually coming up with stuff that I wish I'd thought of. You know, he was very involved from the word go. In terms of does his performance affect my writing? It really doesn't. You know, it's something that Dave and I joke about. I say, you know, we did some events together, and I was asked this, and I said, no, I'm sorry, I just don't see Dave at all when I write. And he said, well, I don't think about you when I'm acting, which is fair enough. Because the thing is, I'm looking at the world through Thorne's eyes. I'm looking out at the world. What Thorne looks like, it doesn't really bother me. It's never something I've really described in any detail. Readers is a different matter, of course. Readers who watch that show almost certainly do see David Morrissey and Aidan Gillen as Hendrix or whatever it might be. I genuinely don't.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? Because I've had a similar kind of thing. I don't know what any of my characters look like at all. Because as you say, you're looking at at things through their eyes rather than looking at them. And people say, who do you want to play this person? They come up with their ideas, and I'm trying to kind of imagine these actors playing them, and it's a very, very strange, surreal thing. I mean,
if you describe your character too much,
yeah,
you are doing the reader's job for them. I mean, that is the joy of reading. The minute a character walks onto the page of a book, you start to picture them. You start to put flesh on the bones. And it struck me how much that happened when about a month before Thorn was aired. We had a sort of big 10-minute preview of it, and we showed it at the Edinburgh Book Festival, and I was sitting on the stage, and the lights went down, and they showed this preview, and the lights went up again, and I was really, pleased and full of myself, and said, "So what do you think?" And the woman at the front row just went, "He's too tall." I just go, okay, well, do you know what I mean? That he doesn't fit that person's image of Thorn, and that's fine. Or, you know what? In these situations, all you want is a good actor. That's really all you can hope for. If you get a good actor, you're fine.
That's the beauty of a book over a TV series or a film, I suppose, isn't it? That you can put your own spin on it, and you put your own twist, and you could see the character looking.
Of course, the book is yours. It's yours, and nobody else will see those pictures. And the same thing, oddly, has I think changed the way I write in terms of when I write about violence. I think the early books, looking back, were too violent. I think I can hold my hand up to that and say that they were, because for several reasons. Firstly, I think, with your early books, you are tempted to throw the kitchen sink at it, and also that seemed to be what people were buying at the time. As I've gone on and hopefully become a better writer than I was back then, I think I've learned that less is more, because readers can imagine that stuff. You just need to nudge them towards the darkness, and you don't need to put every gout of blood up the wall and all that stuff. I don't like reading that stuff anymore, and therefore I think that's why it's changed how I write.
I suppose there's more power in what your own mind can come up with. It's very similar to imagining the character yourself, isn't it? And I know that a lot of horror directors and film directors know this very well, that you don't actually need to show something happening. You
don't want to show the monster, do you? I mean, exactly. It's much scarier. It's much scarier without. And it's a line I've used before, but a single drop of blood on a pristine kitchen floor seems to me a far more powerful image than blood-soaked, whatever. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still writing about violence, and actually, I still think the books are darker actually than they used to be. And perhaps that's one of the reasons. The kind of the threat and the darkness and the shadow is there all the time, rather than here's another body, here's another crime scene, here's another post-mortem, I don't want to do that anymore.
No. Well, now there's something that's come out of I've been watching Collateral and reading a few reviews of David Hare, which is a crime political thriller or whatever. I don't know whether you've seen it.
I haven't actually.
But there's a lot of things have come up about the main character, played by Gary Mulligan, as a detective inspector in charge of this murder operation, and people are saying, one, she gives a wonderfully compelling performance, as you'd expect, but there's this debate that seems to have popped up about fictional coppers. Are they overly dramatised? Do they bear any relation to the ones who turn up, God forbid, at your house or at crimes? And people are saying, well, no, they don't. And how do you feel about that? Should they? I mean, obviously you want to do your research and be as authentic as possible, but there's also got to be a sense of entertainment, because as a writer, your job is partly to entertain, to keep people gripped by a story.
Of course it is.
Does that influence how you portray characters at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the thing is, you want to give the reader completely realistic characters, realistic, fully formed human beings. But whether or not they're realistic coppers is a completely different question. I mean, if the books we wrote accurately reflected the way a murder was investigated, they'd be 1,000 pages long, they'd be extremely dull, you wouldn't be that satisfied with the ending. So it's like a heightened reality we create, and it's a deal you make with the reader, that if that character is engaging enough, they'll forgive the fact that actually, a detective inspector wouldn't be tearing around knocking on doors. They'd be up to their neck in paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And those sort of corners you have to cut in order to make a book 400 pages as opposed to 4,000 pages. So no, of course they're not. I mean, I've had dealings with a lot of coppers over the years, for research purposes. I should clarify that. And no, they're not. They are not all haunted by past cases. They don't go home and listen to country music or jazz or whatever it might be. They don't have problems with the bottle. I mean, maybe some of them do, but most of them are dressed like accountants and, wander about with their lanyards on, doing it, being extremely efficient, not making mistakes, not barking up the wrong tree, not being mavericks. But there are kind of boxes you have to tick. That I think are honouring detectives of the past. I mean, really, I was thinking about this. There are not too many differences between Sherlock Holmes and, John Rebus or Harry Bosch or Tom Thorne. There really aren't, in terms of those characters, socially dysfunctional, lovers of music, problems with substances, all that kind of stuff, sitting there shooting bullet holes in the wall when he can't crack a case. It's amazing to think that Sherlock Holmes is over a century old and actually those archetypes are still knocking around.
Yes. Do you think that's why Thorne has been so popular? Because another comment we had from Kim Allbone on Facebook said that Tom Thorne seems so real. Do you think it is because he kind of fits nicely into that stereotype almost of what we expect from a fictional copper?
Yeah, like I said, there are certain boxes you have to tick, and if you don't want to tick them, then that's fine, but maybe you shouldn't be writing that kind of book. Write a Western, by all means, in which your cowboy doesn't have a hat or a horse or a gun, but he's probably not a cowboy. Nobody's making anybody write these kind of books. I am a writer of popular fiction, of genre-based fiction. I love crime fiction. I always have loved it. And like I say, first and foremost, I'm a reader of it. And I think, one of the reasons series characters become real to people is because there's just so much of them. You can really explore a character when you're doing it over 20 books in a way that you kind of can't in one book. I think it might have been Ian Rankin who said it's like writing one very long book in 20 chapters. And you see characters change, you see their domestic situations change, you see them fall in love, fall out of love, you see people around them die, in a way that if you crammed all that into one book, it would be too much. But over a series, you can really explore a character.
Do you have this kind of ongoing battle as well, which is something I've had, where things do happen in the characters' personal lives and they need to be progressed, and you think, I didn't see this character ever getting married or falling in love, or didn't want their cat to die, but the cat's going to be 35 if I don't do something about that. These things you kind of have to do, and it's quite painful in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and do you know what? I remember having a conversation once with a wonderful British crime writer, John Harvey, who's a friend. And really early on, I remember him saying to me, we were talking about writing crime fiction, and he was talking about what he called the looking out of the window moments. The kind of moments in a book where it isn't crash, bang, wallop and stuff happening and action, but the character is just sitting there. And you see, and his looking out the window moments are rather like Harry Bosch's back porch moments, when Michael Connelly's character will sit there looking out over the canyon, listening to some jazz and just thinking about stuff. And I remember saying to John, oh no, I'm never going to go down that road. I'm much too interested in the crash bang wallop. And he said, just you wait. And 5 or 6 books later, I thought, oh my God, he's absolutely right. They're the bits I really enjoy writing. The bits that really are just about that human being. Yes, he's got a case to solve, but he's also got a life, and the feedback I get from readers leads me to believe that they like that stuff too. They like it when he's just sitting in the pub with Phil Hendricks just chatting about stuff. And yeah, by the end of the chapter, of course, they will, they'll get back to the case.
The crash bang wallop will be back, but you're gaining an entrance. It's a little portal into your characters' lives and personality, which you don't necessarily see in procedure. Although this is one thing I love. The humour, understandably, in your books does come through, the wryness and the darkness of it. I was just reading, last night about Tom giving the finger to someone who's just been committed, who's just been sentenced, found guilty of murder. And this is in the Old Bailey, and I laughed out loud. I thought, that's terrific. Do you find that your humour obviously infuses the way you write? Do you find that easy?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I need to kind of rein it in. I mean,
yes,
my first instinct in any situation is usually comedic.
Yeah.
When I very first started writing stories and I was 12 or 13 at school, they were always funny stories, or I was trying to write funny stories so that I could be, the teacher would ask me to come out to the front of the class and read them out. and 25 years of stand-up comic and stuff, I tend to look for the funny. And obviously these are not those kind of books. There is humour in them. God, I hope there is. There has to be.
Yes, there is. Believe
but there has to be in any novel, even the darkest of. I can't read a novel that doesn't have a vein of humour in there somewhere, because it's just unbearably bleak. And, you want to hear jokes flying around, you go to a murder scene, or you talk to paramedics, because those people have to have humour as a sort of coping mechanism. Otherwise they'd go quietly mad. Sometimes funny things happen in very dark moments, and I want there to be a vein of humour, but I haven't created Thorne as a kind of gag merchant. He's not a wisecracker. He's not Philip Marlowe, or, he's the sort of person who'd think of a joke 3 days later. So I give those jokes to Phil Hendricks or to something else. But I love putting those odd little lines in. And I had a lot of fun in the early books with the character of Thorne's father, who I'd done a lot of research into Alzheimer's, because it was something I thought I needed to get right if you're going to write about that stuff. And Thorne's father has, in the latter stages of Alzheimer's, he starts to lose any degree of kind of social niceties. And I think one of the favourite things I've ever written in a book is where Thorne and he are at a bingo game in a seaside town, and his dad just loses it and just starts swearing and shouting. But when the bingo, he's making up his own filthy bingo calls. Just one of the most enjoyable things I've ever written. Hopefully, of course, also deeply tragic and sad. But the day I stop finding things funny is the day I will want to turn my toes up, I think.
Well, all of that has obviously made the books extremely popular, all of those different elements you've spoken about. And that's something that's backed up by the most popular question that we had submitted to us. Yvonne Wilson and David Lawrence on Facebook, and Stephanie Shepherd on Twitter wanted to know when your next book's out. So he's obviously a very, very popular character, Tom.
Well, the book that Bobby's talking about, which is Love Like Blood, is out in paperback, I think, in 3 weeks. But the next Thorne novel, which is called The Killing Habit, is out on June the 14th.
Wow. June the 14th.
Yeah,
and in the States, Love Like Blood's out in the States. Is it?
Oh, Love Like Blood has already been out in the States. Love Like Blood has been out. I publish in the States around the same time as I publish here, usually give or take a few weeks. So, they will also be publishing The Killing Habit in June, I think. And The Killing Habit, again, rather like Love Like Blood, I never thought I'd do this two books running, but to a degree based on or inspired by a real case, an ongoing case that's unsolved.
Oh, wow.
The case of the Croydon cat killer, the UK cat killer.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so that's the kind of inspiration for the new book. Although I should warn any animal lovers out there that nothing nasty happens to any animal on the page. If there's one thing I've learned, you do not do that.
No.
No.
That doesn't tend to go down too well, does it?
No, God, no. You can do anything you like to people, but harm a hair of an animal's head and they'll come after you. So, even though this is a horrific case. I mean, it's really, it's an odd case, and I had I was able to get reasonably close to that investigation, and some of the theories they've got are just bizarre and interesting, and I knew it was something I wanted to write about.
I can't wait to read that. We'll end on a humorous note, I think. Jay Stringer, a fellow crime writer. You laugh when you hear his name. You know what's coming, don't you?
I know what's coming.
He wants to know where you think Wolves are going to finish next season.
Next season? Well, as long as we finish in the Premiership, because we are going up this season. If we don't, we talk about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. We're 13 points clear at the top of the Championship now, yes. I think. If we don't go up, it will be an absolute disaster. And of course, once you've gone up after years in the Championship, you've just got to try and stay up.
Yeah.
I'm not presuming Wolves are going to be in Europe.
Well, it's the second season, which is the hardest. It's that tricky second album, second book.
But we are playing great football at the minute, and if we can just get up and mid-table in the Premiership next year will be a massive result for us.
Yeah. Do you ever get a chance to see them live?
Yeah.
Yeah,
now and again. Now and again. I'm hoping to go and see them play Fulham, which is a big game actually next weekend, I think. When I can. I'm much more of a part-time supporter than Jay. Jay will he's an absolute fanatic, knows everything there is to know. They were the first team I ever saw, and they were a great side back then. And that's why Thorne is a Spurs supporter. I mean, it's kind of weird because I wanted Thorne to support a slightly ailing football team who like sleeping giants, past glories and all that. And back then that was Spurs.
Yeah.
When I started writing. Were I to create him again, he wouldn't be a Spurs fan because they're doing far too well. I don't know, Star fan or Crystal Palace fan or something. But
we'll not talk too much about Spurs on this podcast. I was going to say next season I'll pop up to Molineux and Arsenal are playing. We'll have to have a couple of beers and catch the football.
No, that's a great idea. We'll do that.
Thank you, Mark. It's been fantastic talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. All the very best.
Thanks ever so much, Adam. Thanks, Bob.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
I think I've just done myself out of 30 quid there by offering her a round of drinks.
Money well spent.
It is, absolutely. And it's another fascinating interview there with Mark. We seem to be getting some great guests and some fantastic stories out of them.
Well, we're very fortunate that Mark is such a great communicator on so many subjects and so wonderfully entertaining. And
it must be so scary, though, to be in that situation he was talking about, being kidnapped and held hostage and tied up. I suppose you've got to write from a new perspective after something like that, haven't you?
Well, I guess so. And I imagine, I think I'm right in saying that he started writing crime novels after that event. So, it's just a truly terrifying thing. And as he was so eloquently, it sort of informed from a first-hand nature his response to fear and his ability to write about people in appalling and desperate situations so well, which, he does.
Yeah. If any kidnappers are listening, I'm quite happy not to have the realism and just to continue making it up. I'm not. I don't want anyone to kidnap me just to make my books more realistic.
Well, they might have to think of kidnapping you. We've decided we should announce really to our listeners that we, Adam and I, inspired by Mr. Billingham and Val McDermott and friends, they're fun-loving crime writers. We are forming a two-man band called Badly Sounding Crime Writers. Adam on spoons and me on the bongos.
And I can play the triangle as well.
Well, listen, our
ding,
cup
ding.
runneth over.
Absolutely, yes. It's full of talent on this show. Full of something.
Full of something.
If you like the sound of Mark's books, why not go and get one on Kobo? They've got more than 5 million titles available, and as a listener to Partners in Crime, you can get a very exclusive 90% off of your first ebook with them. Just put the books into your basket and enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and your first book will be yours with 90% off. Now, next week's show is going to be an absolute cracker as well. Talking about dragging out the big names, I think we're peaking again.
Tell me about it.
With Peter James,
yes.
who is possibly the biggest-selling British crime writer in the world right now, with more than 20 million books sold. I think I'm right in saying, in the Roy Grace series set in Brighton, which has just become an absolute phenomenon over here and on the other side of the pond as well.
Yes, I mean, Peter is, again, like Mark, one of the great communicators amongst the crime writers. He not only writes these extraordinarily brilliant books, but he talks regularly. He is a huge enthusiast for all things crime writing, and he's a wonderful, wonderful chap. What's interesting is he started in the film world before he started writing.
That comes through
books.
Very much in his books, though.
He has a real eye for that filmic quality, and he was a producer and writer, and goodness knows what else. And he's a fascinating man to listen to. Many of our readers may have actually tuned into his podcasts, his Peter James TV, which is absolutely
he's everywhere now. Isn't he?
Yeah, which is absolutely great, or caught him at festivals. But I think he's going to be. Well, I know he's going to be a wonderful guest, and we're looking forward very much to having a chat with Peter.
We've been extremely fortunate with the people who have agreed to give up their time to speak to us. And if you have any suggestions for future guests, please do send them to us. We very much do take them seriously. We've interviewed now 2 or 3 people who have been suggested directly by listeners to Partners in Crime. So if you have somebody you want us to speak to or a topic you want us to cover, please do get in touch. You can email us hello@partnersincrime.online. You can go to our website and send us a message from there. That's partnersincrime.online, and we're on Facebook as well under Partners in Crime Podcast, and on Twitter @CrimeFic Podcast. But I think that's about it for this week.
I think it is. We're going to get some business cards done now, aren't we? You're going to the printers. I say business cards.
Yes.
Partners in Crime cards.
It's all glamour, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're going to take that up to Granite Noir at the weekend.
Yes.
So
that'll be a great future episode, actually. We were just talking about that off air, about...
and on location.
Yes, you taking the recording gear up there and grabbing some of the fantastic crime writers and guests at Granite Noir. If the recording equipment works, I say if the recording equipment works, if you can work the recording equipment.
This is the main obstacle to a successful coverage of Granite Noir on tape for ourselves. It
will be a fantastic episode if you do manage to pull that off.
Something's bound to go wrong. I mean, I'm a fairly optimistic person, but I don't really hold out much hope on the technical side.
I've really kind of tucked you up a little bit there, because by the time this episode goes out, you'll already be at Granite Noir. So I've you've got to do it now.
You're giving me a tape recorder to take. Is it reel to reel? Is it? I mean,
it's not. No, it's a little more advanced than
this.
That.
Is the BBC Home Service live from Aberdeen? No, I will do my best. I can honestly say, Hugh Fraser and I are going up at the weekend. Looking forward to it tremendously, and I'll pump my person a digital recorder, and I'll try and catch as much of it as I possibly can.
Yeah. And if you're there at
don't
Granite
hold
Noir,
your breath.
If you're there, by all means, go and chat to Bob. You may find yourself on an episode of Partners in Crime in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes, and don't try and vlog me insurance. I'm absolutely fine from an insurance point of view. But if you want to talk about anything crime, any views you have, and you see me loitering with intent, tap me on the shoulder and we'll have a conversation.
Don't report him. Go and talk to him. And we'll be back next week with Peter James. So that'll be episode 6.
Is it really?
I think so.
Oh,
I think so. Yeah, I think we're outstaying our welcome.
Well,
but we're going to carry on until someone tells us to stop, aren't we? So.
Well, yes. Can you hear anyone? The phone starts going, stop!
We'll see you next week.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.